specifically the interview. But I'm not alone. I'm with cool kids as well. Winners, champions, if you will. Students, past students, current students, who are here to shed light on their experiences. This is going to be an amazing 30 minutes to an hour. Ask great questions. Learn something. Take something away. But most of all, we're glad that you're here. I'll introduce my gang, my clique, my squad. Squizzy. Cody. Cody's here as a colleague, and I'll let him as well as the other students introduce themselves before we get started.
Sweet. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Darius. And to introduce myself, my name is Cody Leong. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a recent graduate of I'm happy to say that I'm a recent graduate of CC, having just graduated this past May, and I'm now an admission counselor within the office. But I was also an admission fellow during my time at CC, and I'm really, really excited to be able to be here today and talk with you guys about the admission process and about interviews in general. And I can next turn it over to another member of our lovely team, Eva.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eva. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a CC grad of 2019, and I've been working in the admission office as a coordinator for about a year and a half. I'll be here on the chat, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get them answered for you. Thanks for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Ankita.
Perfect. Thanks, Eva. My name is Ankita, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm currently a senior at CC, so I'm a student here, and I'm employed by the admissions office to work as an admissions fellow, meaning I have been the one conducting the interviews for close to a year now, along with Laurel, who will introduce herself in just a second. But we are excited to share with you our different tips and tricks. And beyond that, I am a double major here currently in anthropology and dance. Laurel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laurel. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm also a senior here at CC. I'm majoring in sociology and minoring in education. And yeah, Ankita and I both conduct interviews for prospective students, and we're excited to chat about the process today.
Fantastic. It's my gang. I'm really excited to have them share their experiences here in about 20 to 25 minutes, all about not only their experiences on our campus, but their experiences with the interview process. We're going to go ahead and share our screen now, share some tips, tricks, life hacks, whatever you want to call them, relative to the admission interview, as a lot of you will be beginning the college process here soon. So the all conversation, this is an interviewer conversation. Start preparing your admission interview. If you are in the wrong place, too bad. They're hanging out with the cool kids now. Buckle up. As Cody runs to the next slide, we're going to talk specifically about what is the admission interview. On the very most basic level, an admission interview is a conversation between you and a university representative. Most likely it's going to come from the Office of Admission, right? Because the actual admission interview is part, in many instances, of the application. Conversations can be on college campuses. They can also be over Zoom as we seek to be more equitable, or in another location like a coffee shop or even your own high school setting. The thing is that the admission interview itself can take place anywhere. And so just make sure to bring your full self in that aspect. College university representative will ask you questions about yourself, as well as your interest in the institution, right? So not only are we asking questions about you to get to know who you are, but we also realize that it's an opportunity for you to get to know us. I'm going to pause as I see great questions already coming in the chat. If you have questions about anything that we are saying at this moment, please feel free to use the chat. We have people not only scouring the chat to answer your questions, but also we're going to answer a few questions live at the end. So stay in the chat, folks. Also, why do some colleges use interviews or offer interviews, and why don't others, right? And so sometimes people think that it's some type of secret in the background, right? When really it comes out to just bandwidth. It comes out to ability. Larger institutions with tons of spots in their incoming class, they don't have the opportunity like Colorado College does, who's much smaller, to be able to host interviews and add that interview as part of your application process. More often than not, the admission interview is actually synonymous with holistic application review, which most times happens with medium and smaller size institutions, mostly for proximity. So if you ever find an institution that doesn't offer an interview, that doesn't make them any better or any less of an institution. In your eyes, at least it shouldn't be. Heading on to the next slide. Why do colleges interview? It adds a personal dimension to a student's application. We want to get to know you. Right? You are so much more than a number. You're so much more than a GPA. You're so much more than a test score. You're even so much more than the clubs, right? We're going to ask you questions about what makes you tick. Tell us about life lessons that you've learned in high school. How have you grown? What are you interested in? What makes you happy? How do you want to impact the world? We want to know all those types of questions because we get to, many other institutions get to actually handpick and shape and sculpt their class. A lot of those based on the different and that diverse perspectives that we see in the application pool. Ooh, excuse me. Also, when looking at that, this offers opportunity for you to get to know us. Right. So not only are we going to ask you questions about you, you should come to your interview prepared to ask questions about us and get to know who we are. Right. So maybe that's wondering about teacher and student relationships, or, hey, where does everyone hang out on the weekends when you're not in class, or some cool traditions. Right. Really use this opportunity to make it a relationship, a partnership between you and the institution. Next slide. Should I interview? Heck yeah. Is it required? Very rarely will you see an institution require you to interview. We always say it's, especially at college, we always say that it's recommended, right? It's recommended that you do everything that you can in your power to put your best foot forward and applying to the school that you really want to get into, right? Almost common sense. And so it's not required, but recommended, right? So another question that we get is, does an interview have an impact on whether I get into a college or university? Again, going back to the holistic application review narrative, there's not one specific instance that any college will point to say that is why you were or were not admitted. It is a bunch of different things. It is your test scores. It is not only your grades, but grade trends. It is the level of academic rigor that you engage with in high school. It's also affinity and attending various events like this, showing an institution that you want to be there, right? So will it have an impact? It can have an impact, but it definitely won't be the solo reason, right, for your admission or rejection to an institution. So that's kind of my spiel when it comes to should you interview. As we move forward, our interviews required specifically at CC. Again, that's something that we don't necessarily say that is required, but again, it's about putting your best foot forward. And it's all about context. The biggest thing I can say as someone that reads thousands of applications every year is that I need context, because I'm not there with you every day in your high school, right? I'm not your college counselor. I'm not the homie in the lunchroom, right? I'm not your bestie in the Pokemon club. I don't get to see you in those capacities. But the interview gives me added context. And our student interviewers on this call do an amazing job of really conceptualizing who you are as a student. And so to give you an idea of what it looks like with these lovely folks on the call, you're going to sit down for an interview. That could last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on who you have as an interviewer. In that, you are going to interview and answer all these amazing questions. And you're going to see our lovely folks, interviewers, taking rigorous notes. Don't be nervous about that. Some take notes, some don't. But really, it's just an opportunity for them to have this amazing write-up about you, to be able to put to paper what your experience was for me to read it later, right? And so you really want to bring your full self to the interview process. Going to the next slide. The admission process itself. Why do we offer interviews? At CC, we offer interviews, again, as part of larger holistic application process. What you see on the screen is actually our holistic process in a demographic, in a picture. You're going to have your application, right? But within your greater application is your academics, aka your transcript. Probably many counselors will say that's the meat of your application. And you're also going to have test scores with that potentially if you decide to apply opting into the test policy or test optional. You're going to have your writing essay. You're also going to have a supplemental essay, a question that is additional that asks you, why specifically do you want to attend Colorado College? We're going to get a list of your activities and leadership activities, your extracurricular activities, as well as letters of recommendation. We require 2 of them. It just depends on the institution that you're at, as well as the interview. Each one of these bubbles actually goes into what we call the holistic application process. So that's kind of going back to the narrative where it's not one specific thing, but we look at a bunch of different aspects. When we look at you as an applicant, again, not everything on here is required except for the interview, but I always recommend students to see that as part of the application process if you want to give us, if you want to put your best foot forward. I think the toughest part is if you don't interview, how will we ever have added context when we're looking at you as an individual? So just keeping that in the back of your mind. Sliding on to slide 6, what can I expect from an interview? It's from CC specifically. You can expect the interview to ask you questions about yourself. And I'll definitely let Laurel, Ankita, and Cody definitely speak to that more so, but we want to know about your interests inside and outside of school. Don't think that you have to be captain of the Key Club, a part of National Honor Society, and have this cookie cutter resume to present to an admission representative. Be your authentic self. Whatever makes you tick, whatever you're passionate about, that's what should be highlighted in the interview. We're not looking necessarily, do you fit our culture, but more importantly, can you come and create a positive impact that's going to enrich our culture is what we're looking for in that aspect. There's also going to be questions about your interest on the institution. Please, please, please do your homework on Colorado College. Not only are we trying to get to know you, not only should you get to know us, but it's an opportunity for us to gauge how much you want to be here. Because when it comes down to it, we have the tough decision as admission representatives to figure out, we see this person's grades, they're great. See their test scores, they're awesome. They're super involved. But when it comes down to it, we just don't know how much they want to be here, how bad they want to be here. Because we know there's tons of great options out there in addition to our institution. But the biggest part is not only should we admit this student, but if we do, will they come? So with that, I will slide it over to my colleague, Cody, who will talk about the CC perspective specifically when it comes to the interview process. Cody?
Great. Thank you so much, Darius, for that amazing introduction and segue into talking specifically from the CC perspective. So speaking specifically to what an interview at Colorado College may look like, it's all of the things that Darius just mentioned. I also wanted to talk about like the environment that we really hope to foster with these interviews. Some institutions, they're very, very much trying to decide if like you'd be a good fit for their school. In that case, that's what we call an evaluative interview, in which they're trying to like look for a number of specific things. I'm trying to see if you would be a good fit for your school. However, at CC, we don't want the interview to be a super stressful, high, like feeling like you're a hamburger on a grill process. Rather, we want it to be a two-way street in the way that we want to learn, like we hope you want to learn about us just as much as you want to learn about you. So in that case, we always plan on leaving plenty of time at the end to ask your questions. And our fellows they tend to ask I guess it varies from fellow to fellow, but we like to ask super open-ended questions to allow you to be able to direct the direction that the interview goes in. So next slide. Speaking of the interview process and what it may look like, you may ask, who is going to be doing the interview? So that can look like a number of different people could be conducting your interview. I'd like to first start talking about current students who are currently students at the institution and can speak to their experiences and what they do on campus. For example, here at CC, we have most of our interviews are conducted by admission fellows. Like we said before, we have 2 of our amazing fellows here on the call, Ankita and Laurel. And what their job is outside of their classes, they have the opportunity to speak with you guys in regards to talking about their experience and also talking about your interest in the institution. In addition, Other interviews are conducted by alumni volunteers. And some schools, it depends. Some schools will mostly have interviews conducted by current students, while others will mostly have them conducted by alumni volunteers. But in that case, usually what this happens is this is an alumnus of the school who has demonstrated they have an interest in helping cultivate the next class of students. And then oftentimes they'll be local to you and you could meet them at a coffee shop or something like that. And alternatively, you could also interview with one of the admission staff, like me, myself, or Darius or Eva. Typically, if like in non-COVID times, if we're on the road, we may have a day when we're in a given area, and you'll have the opportunity to sign up for interviews in that regard. So, speaking in regard to general tips on having a college interview, the biggest thing I can say is please prepare for your interview. Your college interview, regardless of which institution you may be at. That's not the time to like think, oh, I can totally wing this and come in completely unprepared. Because if you do that, it'll be very clear to your interviewer like that you just walked in, and that's not going to make a good impression on them. The best word of advice that I can give you guys is read the website of the institution that you're interviewing at. The reason why I recommend this specifically is a lot of different schools have different expectations. For example, some schools might require you to bring in a resume dressed in a certain way or anything like that. And it's important to have that and know that and take that into account prior to your interview beginning. Also, institutions differ in the way that they conduct their interviews. Here at CC, we have you have the ability to sign up directly for an interview, and we have a number of open slots available. But other schools, typically those that rely more on their alumni volunteers to conduct them, they'll have you fill out a form to request your interview, and then they'll get back to you if they have availability to do so. In addition to doing your research, you can discern if an institution, if they have evaluative interviews in which the person who will interviewing will be taking notes and trying to gauge your fit for the institution, or if it may be just strictly an informative interview in which it's just an opportunity for you to get to know the college better. And speaking from here at CC, our interviews we'd like our interviews to be a mix of both, in which that through talking with we want to gauge you how you feel about CC, and if you'd be a good fit for the institution. But on top of that, we also want it to be an opportunity for you to gain more information about CC itself. Another big recommendation I would have is for any school is take advantage of engagement opportunities that may be offered. Number one, this shows you that you're interested in the school. Some schools really like to take into account how much you've engaged with them during your process of applying. And also it gives you information about the institution. And the more you know the institution, that'll come through in your interview, and it'll pay dividends in regards to you speaking about your experiences and your interest in the institution. And in regards to generally prepping for an interview, I'd highly recommend have some thoughts on some topics that you may want to talk about, but on the same coin, don't plan out all of your responses ahead of time. If you plan out exactly what you're going to say, that'll come off as being super wooden, and it comes off as being pretty inauthentic. So in that case, have an idea of, say, like something that you're really interested in that you'd like to talk about, and in the case you get a question in that regard. In addition, I'll expand upon this later, but come prepared with some questions that you'd like to ask. And in regards to questions, I'd highly recommend thinking of questions beforehand that show that you've done some research on the institution. So speaking to CC specifically, where should I start? If you're just starting by researching the school, I'd recommend just go on the CC website and click through the different pages, get an impression of some things you may be interested in. In addition, we also offer information sessions that are led by our student admission ambassadors, and these are all run by current students who are experiencing the block plan and living on CC, and essentially they can speak to their experiences and talk about what drew them to CC and essentially why they like it. In addition to that, if you have more specific questions here at CC, we're also offering Cub Chats. And what that is, that's a one-on-one conversation with a Colorado College student, and the topic is up to you of what you'd like to talk about. And also, if there's some specific area that you may be interested in, we're also offering special topic student sessions led by several students in which you can talk about, say, studying STEM on the block plan, academics in general, outdoor education, things like that. Next, I'd like to talk about a little bit about, tips that are specific to the interviewer. And I guess I definitely want open up the floor to the fellows to jump in and talk about this as well. But some topics that you may be wondering, what will my interviewer ask me about? And the biggest recommendation I would say to give you in preparing for one of these interviews is think about your past experiences and how they've influenced the person you are today. For example, like a lot of us, we do understand that as high school is a time where lots of things are happening in your life. You're probably not the same person that you were when you first walked into high school on your first day of ninth grade. And a lot of questions that we might ask, we want to see if you can reflect, think about where you came from and not the space that you occupy in the world nowadays. A question when I was a fellow that I always like to ask was, if you could go back to talk to your freshman yourself, what would you say to them in that regard? And I guess I'd like to also ask Ankita and Laurel, I guess, any questions that like they really like to hone in on or topics that they like to talk about in their interviews.
I guess I can start with kind of like a broader statement that like the way when I'm introducing myself during my interview, introducing how the interview goes to whoever I am interviewing, I always tell students to think about like the stories that have happened in their life and to frame it as a story. For me, like on the other side of the table, it's much more interesting to hear you like tell me a story about yourself. And from there, I will parse out, how that's showing teamwork, how that's showing leadership, how that's showing whatever else that we may be looking for. I'll ask follow-up questions, but it all starts with that one story. So I think it's most helpful to come into interview settings with, 4 or 5 good stories you can tell about yourself and then let them speak for themselves. I think that's quite important. As for like one topic that I really enjoy talking about during my interviews, CC is committed to being an anti-racist institution. That's increasingly important for our admissions office, which is very important to me as well. And I always try to ask a question about equity, social justice, understanding your own power and privilege in the world in all of my interviews. And I think one thing to realize there is that we're not looking for people to be right in what they're saying. I think that's, or at least I speak for myself, that's not what's important for me. I'm more interested in your commitment to learning about these issues and wanting to grow and improve upon yourself as a person. So just like keep that in mind, that it's okay to have weaknesses in certain areas when answering certain questions, especially if they are a little bit more specific. But that for me, it really is all about seeing students who are committed to kind of what CC's values are, where all that research comes into what we are like as a school as well.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Ankita has said, and I'll add a few things that just sort of take it in a different direction as well. I think for me, when I'm interviewing a student, I want to get to know them and, like Ankita said, hear stories. And sometimes I've had interviews where a student and I have that one story and that's all we talk about for the entire interview. And so I have a list of questions that I sometimes ask, but no interview is the same. And so really, I want to sort of get to know you and think about how this interview is supplementing your application. So I can, like the people reading your application can read all of the things you've participated in high school and your extracurriculars and your grades and things like that. And so I want to hear about things that I can't read in your application and get to know you on a deeper level with a story or a funny anecdote or a memory or something like that. So that's sort of a piece of advice I give you, is to think about how can you use your interview to supplement your application. And I think a recent favorite question of mine, and they go in phases for sure, but I like to ask people about what is the last thing that they lost track of time, like doing or thinking about, because I think it's fun to get to know what people like to do in their free time outside of school and outside of sort of what's already in their application. And I'm trying to get to know that person on a deeper level. And so through that usually comes a fun story. And then, like Ankita said, we can sort of pick out those characteristics we might be looking for. But sort of seeing people's energy explode in a story is magical. And that's sort of the best way to go into an interview and let us get to know you.
And then as a last tidbit, I think this is something we've definitely talked about in the fellows team, but When if you are asked some derivation of why you want to be at CC, don't just say the block plan, because that is absolutely one amazing reason to be at CC, one thing that draws a lot of students in, but everyone tells us that. So if you're saying that, you better have a really good reason or really good story to back it up why you want to be on the block plan. But if not, really just dig deep into our website, talk to students, go to those information sessions to find out more. Because then we can include it in our write-up for you rather than just, forgetting that you said the block plan like most other kids do.
Great. And some just in building upon, thank you so much for saying those amazing words of advice and questions, but some other just general tips for the interview itself is just, this sounds cliche, but please be yourself. And we want to hear about the real you and why the real you is drawn to CC in that regard. And also interviews don't have to be the first time that you talk about topics like this. I highly recommend practicing. Just talk with some friends, say you and your friends are going through a similar processes, have them ask you questions and then bounce them off of them and get some experience in that way. And also, this is just in general, but make a good first impression. And that doesn't have any one definition. Just say maybe that 10-year-old pair of sweatpants, they may be the most comfortable thing in the world, but maybe they're not the best choice to come into the interview room with. We have a casual dress code for interviews here at CC, so you don't have to show up wearing a suit or anything like that, but just wear something that you're comfortable in and makes you feel good. And if you have a specific outfit that makes you feel like $1 million, wear that. But yeah, so just moving into the more logistical side of things, I just want to do a quick walkthrough of showing how to sign up for an interview specifically on the CC website. So let me switch this back to exit out of this. Great, so, all right, so speaking from the CC perspective, so here we are starting on the Colorado College website, and if we navigate to the admission and aid dropdown, you can click into admissions and click into where you're looking for students, click into there. And I'd highly recommend taking a look at all of these things as they're an absolutely invaluable resource in applying to CC specifically. And any college is going to have, university is going to have a landing page like this. And this is just a great resource to use to learn more information about different aspects of the college. So with the way that the world looks right now, we're offering all of our virtual opportunities online, and clicking into here, just saying this is I'm going to plug all of the different opportunities that we have available here. And in this case, if you'd like to schedule an interview, juniors are now, we'll talk more specifically about timing in just a minute, but if you'd like to click through this, schedule an interview, and you'll notice these dates are for the previous class, so don't worry about these for now, but you'll notice through the month of May that you'll have booked out interviews that when you can book out. And the block just started, so more interview opportunities will appear soon. But apart from that, though, we highly recommend taking a look at the website and taking advantage of all those opportunities that we do have available. Oh, so let me present. Stopping share. Let me go back to presenting. Let's see. Technology will decide to be on our side.
And while Cody's bringing this up, we're actually gonna transition into timeline here pretty quickly, because a bunch of you are asking about timelines. Because some of you are hiding out there. There's freshies out there. And there's sophomores saying, yo, I'm about that college life. What about me? I'm ready. Put me in, coach. I'm going to say, whoa, bro. Sis, person, relax. Freshman year should be all about exploration. Explore your passions. Find ways to get ingrained in your high school community. Stay up late. Binge watch Netflix. Just relax. Everything's going to be okay. Sophomore year, that's when you take the PSAT. That's where you kind of start thinking do I see myself near my parents for that much longer? Or do I want to go to an amazing college elsewhere? Do I want to stay close? Do I want a big school? Do I want to do the frat life or the sorority life? Or do I want to play sports or go to football games on Saturdays? What matters to me? Junior year is a great time to start exploring and building those said lists and those said colleges, right? So when it comes to the admission process and in interviews, the biggest thing is deadlines. just know about deadlines, right? And so it usually depends when you should interview, depending on early decision or early action. Those tend to be earlier in the fall versus regular action, early decision too. That tends to be more middle of winter, right? Think mid-January or December. So a few of you asked specifically about interviewing as a junior, right? And we do have, at CC, we do have interviews available. I think it varies between schools as far as their policy, but just speaking specifically for CC, yes, you absolutely can interview as a junior. I'll let the fellows speak specifically to that experience. We just, on the professional staff, always suggest that students interview as seniors. You're more ingrained in your high school community. You're starting to think more reflectively once you actually get to senior year and start making those preparations. We found that students' answers are more thorough and more in-depth when they're a senior, right? Think about yourself from even the students on the call from junior to senior year of high school, or junior to senior year of college. There's a major difference, I feel like, in the maturation process, but also your ability to think critically about what you're trying to accomplish. Right. So when we think about actual process, freshman year exploration, and so is sophomore year, right? And then junior year, you really start to think critically about what you want to do, where you want to go, how you want to change the world. A lot of people wait till senior year to start discovering those said things, but senior year gets packed and gets hectic. And so not only do you want to wrap up senior year socially and academically, but there's also, you don't necessarily want to apply to colleges during that time as well. And that's where the compound stress comes in, where you're exploring colleges and you're applying to colleges and you're figuring out prom committee and you're doing homecoming and you also have a sport and you're challenging yourself with 6 APs. You have to be kind to yourself and start on the college process. The earlier, the better. Cody, are you cool if we head into Q&A?
Absolutely. And so just one more thing that I'd like to mention before we launch into the Q&A is, we're so glad that you took the time out of your afternoon to join us this afternoon for this boot camp. But if you're looking to learn more about CC or just the entire college admissions process in general, we invite you to take advantage of one of our other bootcamp opportunities. We have one coming up at the end of next month about researching colleges and finding fit. Would highly recommend that because when I was applying to colleges, the liberal arts schools were not even on my list initially. Look where I ended up now, I suppose. And following soon, not soon, but moving more into the summer, we're having a student panel of our student employees, of our ambassadors and fellows, talking about what they thought about when they were looking around at colleges, and I guess how that eventually led them to decide to apply to and attend Colorado College. And finishing out as we go right into the summer, we'll talk about the holistic review process, which Darius mentioned a few times earlier today. What does that really mean, or is it just a buzzword? But in that case, admissions staff will break down exactly what it means and what goes down to what's part of the process when a college says that they are looking at your application holistically. But with that, I'd love to thank you again, you guys for taking advantage of this opportunity today. And we can switch into a Q&A format, and you guys can ask us any of us any questions. We'd love to answer them.
Yeah. So feel free to either put your questions in the chat, or if you're brave enough to unmute and ask before the class, feel free to do that. But this part of the panel is for you. What questions do you want to know, right? And you don't feel like you have to limit them to the interview process, because that's what this session is. If you have just general questions about college, rarely do you have a group of such accomplished seniors and alumni on a call. So I would encourage you to utilize the wealth of knowledge on this phone call. Or on this Zoom call. No one does phone calls anymore. It's weird. Even FaceTime, I'm like, let's just look at each other in the face. Neither here nor there. Questions for this lovely group of students? Jackson, you're the man. What's up, bro?
So for all the students or current students, what sold you guys? Like, what was the biggest thing that sold you on Colorado College?
I'll go first this time. We can alternate on Kita. There's a lot of different things, but I'll try to choose one for the sake of time and to not just blabber at all of you for hours. I think the students are ultimately what sold me about CC. I visited, so my college process, I didn't really know what I was looking for in a college. I changed my mind halfway through the fall of my senior year. And like CC was one of the schools I added onto my list at that point. So I didn't really know much about CC when I applied early action. And then after I got in, I decided to come and visit. And sort of the two stories I share are sitting in a class with my host student, like the student that I was spending the night with. And it was like a music dance class meets anthropology. So they were discussing sort of social issues and the power of the art with social issues. And so I was sitting in this class and students were having this very engaging conversation. And then we walked to the dining hall and there was this like balance of ability to talk about what we were just learning in class, but then also this like goofiness that I sensed in the students. And that night, I went to what's called Dance Workshop, which Ankita can talk much more about, but it's a student run by Ankita and a couple of other people, student run, student choreographed dance performance that happens twice a year here. And I'd say that it's like the most broad reaching event on campus, meaning that it sort of reaches the broadest array of students at this school. And it's always sold out every night. It's always jam packed. And I saw kids up there that were in my class earlier that day, just having the best time with like the biggest smiles on their faces. And so while sitting there, I loved sort of this like curiosity and love for learning that I saw in the classroom paired with the willingness of these students to like be goofy and have fun and not take themselves too seriously. So that was kind of what sold me on CC.
See if I can get one more opinion as to why, because we got some good questions coming in the chat. Why'd you choose CC?
I mean, I would echo just everything Laurel said. The people are really what do sell the school. I hope you all, like, fingers crossed, can come and visit. What really sold it for me too was my campus visit. I was coming from a very stressful high school situation, and I really wanted to be a part of a collaborative community. And I think when CC does a pretty good job with their marketing, and once they get you here too, the way they kind of run you through kind of what a student's life is like and give you close interactions with real students who are doing really cool things. That's what really made me want to be a part of the community. It felt very warm, personable, and close even before I was formally a part of it. And that was pretty cool.
Very cool. Another question for the panel, and I'm just skipping around here because these are all really great questions. From the student's perspective, how do you feel Colorado College handled COVID, specifically maybe through the classroom lens? Are classes online now, or still online, excuse me?
Yeah, I can I guess you'll hear a bit more from me, but CC handled COVID much the same as many institutions did. There was, I think, a sharp learning curve to how we handled COVID. We are in this semester, there has been a large increase in the number of online classes being offered. I would say last semester, something like 90% of our classes were online. Virtually everyone was on Zoom. We did have about 1,000 or so kids either back on campus or in the Colorado Springs area. And even then, most of the community I felt like was online. I think this semester that's really changed a little bit in a positive way and having more in-person opportunities. 2 of my classes have been in person this semester. I know quite a few students. There's been just a large uptick in the percentage of students who have had or are having at least one in-person class this semester. And I'm sure with the vaccine, with hopefully getting students vaccinated in the coming year as well, that's only going to increase. And as a side note, like a lot of the classes that are back in person are those like lab classes, are classes where being in person really does add something to what you're learning as well. And they're working on getting other classes back in person too.
Very cool. I definitely want to speak to this next question. Colorado College is one of my top choices, but my only concern is I found that there's a lack of low-income students. That's predominantly wealthy student population, and anyone else on the call, low-income student who has a perspective on this. I know it's a QB school, Questbridge, which is a great point. And it's working to raise funding to make the school more accessible, but I was just wondering how it is currently. Jackie, thank you so much for your thoughtful question. I think I definitely wanted to read that out loud for others to hear. No secret, that is American selective higher education in a nutshell. right? The people that can afford to pay for out of pocket are here because they generate a lot of revenue for the institution, right? And so you'll notice that there's kind of like this imbalance in higher education where there's a small group of students who are low income on campuses, but then a rather large group of wealthy students. A lot of the time, you'll find out that those institutions where that's happening is tuition dependent, right? And a lot of it is tuition revenue. So a lot of it is money in the background. And actually, it took me a while to kind of figure out why that was. And a lot of it is, I believe, the way that higher education has been set up. The prices is increasing over the years, and it's even becoming even more inaccessible. But I love that Colorado College has been a QuestBridge partner since 2013. I love that we have funded campus visit programs to where we fly students to campus, and we're looking to expand those programs. Everything from bringing students to campus, to flying them in, to anti-racist initiatives, to even recruitment efforts. We want to go to where we haven't gone to recruit students before. And so a lot of it is on the institution to make a conscious effort. But I believe that if we build it, they will come. So as an institution, we are working on making ourselves more accessible, more feasible, more available to you as students. So thank you so much for that. And I definitely think that it is on the institution to make that change. We just have to continue to have those conversations and continue to tell colleges what you need as a student to feel a part of that community and feel like you fit and belong there, with emphasis on belonging. So thank you so much for that. Jackie, if you want to talk more about that, I could talk about that all day. So feel free to give me a shout. Another question for the group. What is your favorite thing about CC? It's hard to shift gears there. Take it serious and then bring it there. You got to be able to switch up, folks.
I would honestly say like one of the best things about CC is, and like, I guess I'm going to start by saying the students, and building upon that is just I kind of wanted to answer this. I saw a question about like something you didn't know about CC until you arrived on campus. Was something that I think is absolutely amazing, and I didn't realize beforehand, was how passionate the students at CC are. And in that regard, I don't mean just specifically in regards to like what they're studying, but also what they do outside of the classroom. Like take, for example, like dance workshop and stuff like that. Students are super committed to that. On top of their studies, when I was a student, I found my home in the outdoor education department, despite having never camped before coming to CC. But just in talking with anybody who attends CC, you'll find that they really care about the things that they choose to spend their time doing, and they love to talk about it as well in that regard. And I'd say that's something that I absolutely love about CC and its students.
Very nice.
I can go. I really love the small student environment with 2,100 kids. It's a very close-knit, small community. I wanted a school where you could walk around and recognize anyone. I know not everybody wants that kind of experience, but if you're going to come to a school like CC, you should be prepared to know everyone that's walking around. And I really liked that. I had one class that was 6 students. My biggest class was 25 students. If you want to be someone who's a fly on the wall, it's not really a school like CC, but I really wanted to be engaged in my classes. I also saw a question go by about the alumni network. Comes with the small school, which is really awesome. Yes, a bigger school, maybe like a USC or something, has a bigger network. But to me, a smaller school has a closer knit network. So I've found a lot of opportunities as a graduate, all from CC connections, especially within the Colorado area, because a lot of alums stick around. So I love the CC network, and it's helped me a lot in my post-grad life.
Fantastic. Great point, Eva. We have about 15 minutes left in the session, so please continue to put your questions in the chat. For the group, Nora was wondering about how CC is aiming to become carbon neutral. Oh, just you wait. As someone that wants to impact the world by working on ecosystems and conservation, very cool. That is specifically something that draws me to CC. And furthermore, in what ways are students of CC able to directly help CC become carbon neutral? You want to take that one?
I can take it.
Yeah.
Well, so the first part is that we are carbon neutral as of last year. So that's something that the school has been committed to for a while, obviously, to be able to become carbon neutral. And it's kind of just like embedded in the values of the school in a way that I didn't really know until I got here. And then like certain like language about carbon neutrality and things like that were just like in the language at the school. And so that's been something that has been in the works for my whole time here. And I think a lot of that is due to the work of the Office of Sustainability, which is an office here on campus, and they are a large center for student employment as well. So I actually live with two people who work in the Office of Sustainability, and so they played a pretty active role in CC becoming carbon neutral, whether that be talking to people in the city or pushing the administration on different issues and researching those issues, or implementing small changes here at the college, and raising awareness among the student body as well. So we are carbon neutral, and I would say that doesn't mean that we're just like stopping there. The Office of Sustainability is kind of the jumping point for that work. And if you're interested in doing that type of work, I suggest looking at their website. And if you choose to come here as a student, looking at that as a place to volunteer or work once you're a student as well.
Great. Thank you for that. Maybe what's one thing one of you would have did differently in your college search or application process? Did anyone answer that one yet? Yeah. What's one thing you would have did differently?
I would say in my process, I wish like I would have casted a wider net than I initially did. And I'm from Houston, Texas, and down there, like almost everybody, like the large majority of my friends in high school went to like big schools when they had like student bodies in the tens of thousands. And I didn't come across CC until later on in my process. And after like learning more about CC, attending a few opportunities, I realized that like the smaller college environment that Eva spoke to earlier was really much more for me. So I'd say like, yeah, from the beginning, I wish I would have casted a wider net and like taken in all of those different, taken in like all the different types of colleges that are available here in the US in that regard.
I would encourage people to allow themselves some time to process and think. I went to a high school, I'm from just outside of Boston, and I went to a high school that heavily emphasized applying early decision to a school. And I was one of very few people in my graduating class who didn't apply early decision to a school. And that was mainly because I did not feel like I was in a place to make a decision. And I'm not advising against early decision. There's many benefits to it. And for those of you who don't know what that is, basically it's a binding decision. So you're applying that early deadline of November 15th or November 1st. And if you get in, then it's a binding decision to go to that school. And so I would just say allow yourself some space to, if you don't know that you want to go somewhere, don't apply early decision just for the sake of it, because as Darius was saying about the interview timeline of sort of all that changes in you as a human from junior spring until senior fall, allow for that change to also happen from senior fall to senior spring. And so I guess that's advice I got. I'm the youngest of 10, so I got a lot of college advice from my various siblings. And so I just encourage you all to sort of allow yourself to take a step back. I get that the process is super stressful, but recognize that you can change your mind. I changed my mind like 6 times in my college process. And that was something I was grateful that people advised me to not rush a decision because of the stats of getting in somewhere, but rather allowing myself to think more about what I wanted. And frankly, what I wanted dramatically changed from my senior fall to my senior spring.
It's good. Very good. Amelia, great question. What are some of the most common majors at CC? Man, it's such a tough question just because there's so many unique majors to be able to go off into and follow your passion via those. But I will say that econ is pretty popular. I know business, international political economy is really popular as well. bio tracks are really popular as students seek to do med school or anything relative. Environmental science is really popular as well. At Colorado College, you have 16 blocks, or the equivalent of the beginning of your sophomore year, after the conclusion, of your sophomore year, to select a major. The biggest misconception out there is that students have to have a major before they go to college, right? And the reality is that you don't really know what that major is like until you take classes in that major. And more often than not, if you declare beforehand, unless you know 1,000% sure that's what you want to do, students have had history of changing majors. Sometimes those changes can be costly as far as time goes. So we always say, take your first 2 years to explore, find your passions, discover what you're interested in, and then take a deep dive into that for the remaining 16 blocks. You just need 32 to graduate. It's going to be here and done before you know it. Great question. So we got a few more minutes here. Scouring the chat, some great questions here. Continue to put those in there. Can anyone speak to cultural clubs or programs at CC, and maybe just student life at CC during COVID and what that was like? And one thing, if anyone, before anyone says anything, if anyone has anything to say that, I'm not sure, but I am the advisor for Black Student Union. And it's been cool because, yes, we've been limited to Zoom, but there's just been so much camaraderie, so much culture sharing during that time. CC is a very tight-knit community. So even during the global pandemic, we were committed to staying close to each other and depending on each other emotionally and socially to be able to thrive in a time that was super challenging. And so from the BSU perspective, it's been fantastic. I won't speak for all cultural programs or affinity groups or even groups in general, but I just know CC as a whole is really tight-knit in that aspect. And it's been great. And I can only imagine what it's going to be like when we get together in person as besties. Anyone else want to speak to student life on campus during these times?
Yeah, I think in terms of like what student clubs and orgs are out there, I recommend going on our website. There's a huge list, and if there's any that you're interested in particular, the student leaders for those clubs are all listed under the name of the clubs with their emails. And so feel free to shoot those students an email and ask them any questions that you have. I know that was helpful for me to just kind of understand what was out there at CC. And once you start looking at multiple different schools and their websites, you start to see what are sort of specific to CC and what are more common in like colleges across the country. But I would say in regards to COVID, I think sort of speaking to that learning curve that Ankita mentioned earlier, I think at the beginning, student clubs and organizations didn't really know what to do. And people kind of just like did their thing at home and were doing online learning. And I think that the communication from the college has been much better. And I think student organizations and clubs have learned how to exist virtually and how to not burden people with too many Zoom meetings, but also have enough that people feel connected. So I think that that's definitely something that people have improved upon this second semester. And I feel very hopeful for all of you in what your college experiences will look like, hoping that most of it won't be virtual for you. Because I do think that the clubs and organizations here at CC are like how I found a lot of my friends. I think it's how I did things in college that I wouldn't have expected to do when I was applying to colleges, but just by meeting someone or trying something new. So I think that if you enter college in a virtual world, I encourage you to at least find one organization that's appealing to you and talk to the student leaders as a way to get connected, because it's a really cool way to meet people.
Good point. Another great question here from Alexander that kind of speaks to that same thing, Laurel, but essentially maybe in the near future, not being able to visit campus. What's one thing that you didn't know about CC until you arrived on campus / became a student? It's a good question.
I think this was more for become a student rather than arrived on campus. For become a student, I would say And I would say that it really helps to know like how each discipline feels on the block plan. If you have any idea of what you might want to do at CC, try to reach out to a student, try to reach out to a professor. Everyone's like super more than likely to want to talk to you. And I think everything just functions really differently on the block plan. For me in particular, like I was like really interested in the sciences. And then I got here and I was like, I can't be specifically like environmental majors because I can't be doing field work so often on the block plan where I'm just away from the work that I need to do in terms of having a job and all of that. So that really impacted my education here. And I think similarly, it just helps to know what you're getting into. And every major is kind of its own journey on the block plan. And I think it's really cool, but just worth knowing about prior to being here.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in regards to like the campus itself, it is an urban campus, which I think is something that makes us stand out as a small liberal arts college. A lot of the schools I was looking at, they were in much smaller towns. And so I think that that's, in my opinion, a benefit. Everyone has their own opinion, but I think it's cool to be in a small campus community, but then there's also this much larger campus around us. So for me, when I was looking at colleges, I wanted a school that was like 3,000 to 7,000 students, which I learned there's not many of in this country. And so I sort of had to decide what I was willing to let go and what I really held on to. And so for me, I think I've been really involved in the greater Colorado Springs community. I've worked in various different schools. And I think that that's been a way for the school to feel larger to me because I have a community here at the college, but then I've also gotten to know citizens of Colorado Springs and gotten to know the city in a very unique way as well. So I think for those of you who are concerned about the size, that's one point to touch on is just that we are in a city and that can make it feel smaller or make it feel bigger along with all of the benefits of being in a city in terms of like what's around the campus and things like that.
Great point. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our session. We won't hold you any longer. Your face has been in a screen long enough. It's time to say goodbye. Better yet, see you later. Hopefully in our process. But no matter what, we hope that you took something today that struck you, turned that light bulb on, and inspired you. Support can support you in your college process. We're here for you. We hope this isn't the last time we ever hear from you. So use this as a resource. Please email us with any questions, any concerns that you may have. We are here for you. We're going to be besties until you figure out where you're going to college. We're here to help on the way. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Take care of yourselves in every sense of the word. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for being here.